So welcome, everyone. We have a really nice turnout tonight. Obviously, many of us have some real concerns and some deep interest in our utilities and what's happening specifically with our We Energies plans for future alternative energy use. And so we're really fortunate tonight to be able to host a couple of speakers from We Energies to address this. But just to remember that back in, oh gosh, that was in November, just about a month ago, front page of the business section of the Milwaukee Journal, if you can see this, was big headlines that We Energies and that are their parent group, WEC Energy Group or WEC Energies, plan to close the Oak Creek coal units. And these are the older units that are down in Oak Creek that have been of concern to people in the environmental movement and people who live in the area who've been working for some years to see these old plants closed down. So it was very good. And it also said that We Energies planned to pursue more solar, wind, and battery storage energy projects. So we thought, okay, this is excellent. Let's get a chance to talk more about this, see what other future plans there may be that haven't been announced yet. And also, what are some of the impacts of these plans on the customers and on the people who live in the area and on consumers. And so we're going to pursue some of those questions that we've posed to our speakers. So now I'm not sure, Richard and Tanya, how you want to take these, but I'll just introduce both of you and you can decide which one of you is going to address some of these issues first, and you'll probably be going back and forth with some of your comments. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Richard Stasik, who is the director of the State Regulatory Affairs for We Energies. And about a year ago, I think it was last September, that he did speak to our 350 Milwaukee group when at that time we were meeting at the Urban Ecology Center. And so it's nice to have you back again, Richard. And then our other speaker is Tanya Holler Muench, who is Director of Corporate Communications for We Energies. And we're very happy to have her join us also. So why don't the two of you just take on these questions and proceed.
I'm sorry. I think how we're going to start is Rich is just going to go through a little overview to give everyone kind of the setting of what it is that you referred to in November was announced, our plan for increasing our reliance on renewable energy while still maintaining fuel diversity, which will provide our customers with the reliable and affordable energy they need. So I'll turn it over to Rich to walk through that overview for you guys, and then we can talk through some of the questions that you referred to, Julie. Okay?
Fine.
Okay.
All right. So with that, I guess thank you for having me back. Apparently, things went well enough last time that you were willing to have me back, so I appreciate that. And the flexibility here with the Zoom meeting. So it's always good to be able to leverage the technology. So to Tanya's point, what I'd like to do is walk the group through at least a high level, sort of what gets us here. Some of this will be an update really for those of you who were in attendance when we met last September, as we had talked about sort of some of our plans, and this is a little bit of a step forward and starting to implement some of those. Excuse me, a couple of things that we really want to talk about that are really driving a lot of these changes are, we have a new goal that we set out for our 2030 carbon reduction goal. So if you recall, we used to have a goal that was to reduce carbon emissions 40% from our 2005 levels by 2030. We've renewed that goal based on some experience here, and I'll get into the details on that. But we've enhanced that goal to now be a 70% reduction of carbon emissions from our fleet by 2030 compared to 2005 levels. So the blueprint we're going to talk about at a high level that included the retirement of Oak Creek and the implementation and installation and use of some of the renewable technologies that you talked about, Julie, is really part of that blueprint to help us achieve that 70%. So we'll talk through those two kind of high level things and then open it up for questions. I believe some of the questions you've got we'll certainly cover here in the prepared elements that we had, and then those that we don't, we're happy to talk through as you have them. So as I had indicated just a few minutes ago or a moment ago, we had a carbon reduction goal to reduce our emissions by 40% by 2030. So we had tremendous progress that was driven by our generation reshaping plan at that point. And ultimately we met and then exceeded that 40 by 30 goal all the way back in 2019. We're over a decade ahead of schedule. So what that caused us to do is really take a hard look at what should we be doing here now that we've achieved that ahead of schedule? How can we refine our goals and set the sights on achieving even greater success as we go forward? So on July 30th of this year, we actually announced a new goal in the short term, which is to reduce our carbon emission, again, by 70%. By 2030 below our 2005 levels. In addition, we also laid out a goal to be net carbon neutral by 2050. And that's based on, again, the success we've had up to this point through executing our reshaping plan. So in addition to greenhouse gas emissions, we also have some other policy priorities. We need to make sure that the energy we deliver is not only safe and reliable, but also affordable to our customers. And one thing we've learned as we've been working through our generation reshaping plan is preserving reliability and advancing sustainability really do go hand in hand with one another with the technologies that we're able to deploy today. So meeting our carbon reduction goals of 70% and then net carbon neutral by 2050 is really going to require consultation with our customers, stakeholders, elected officials, and then the regulatory commissions with which we operate. And really broad brushstrokes, it's going to include needing to retire our older, less efficient fossil fuel plant, making corresponding investments in our low-cost renewables right here in the state of Wisconsin. And as we talked about when I was with you guys in September of last year, creating some energy solutions in combination and partnership with our customers in the communities we serve. And we'll touch on some of those in just a minute. So one of the things that we find to be helpful and powerful is to talk through what our generation fleet from a coal standpoint looked like when we first started our generation reshaping plan back in 2017, what it looks like today, and then what we imagine it would look like in 5 years. So kind of working through, sorry, I'm running into a proxy issue here real quick. I apologize, popped on my screen. So if we look at what we had as far as a coal fleet in 2017, we had 4,935 megawatts, so let's call it 5,000 megawatts of coal generating capacity. Since then, we have announced and executed some retirements. We've retired the Pleasant Prairie Power Plant, which had about 1,200 megawatts of emission, or 1,200 megawatts of generation. There was a unit at Edgewater, it was unit 4 that we were a co-owner of with Power and Light or Alliant. That was 100 megawatts for our portion of it that was retired. Then in October of 2018, we retired the 200 megawatt Pulliam Power Plant up in the Green Bay area. And then the last retirement we've executed on up to this point was the 350 megawatt Presque Isle Power Plant in Marquette, Michigan. So in a short 3 years, we took our coal generating fleet from just under 5,000 megawatts to just over 3,000 megawatts, or essentially 40% of our coal fleet in just the past 5 years. After announcing those and executing on those retirements, I believe we shared this set of information related to some solar projects that we were in the process of getting approval for back in 2019. And I've got some updates on those that we're excited about. First, the Two Creeks Solar Project up in Two Rivers, Wisconsin, our WPS affiliate will be purchasing 100 megawatts of the 150 megawatt project, and that has a corresponding $130 million renewable energy investment. And in fact, the in-service data that just passed here at the end of November, that particular solar project was put in commercial operation and is now feeding clean renewable energy into the transmission system. In addition to Two Creeks, we are also going to be installing and acquiring 200 megawatts of solar capacity from the Badger Hollow Solar Park down in Iowa County. 100 megawatts of that will serve our WPS customers. Another 100 megawatts will serve our WE Energies customers. And then there's a balance of that plant, another 100 megawatts that's being purchased by our partner, Madison Gas and Electric. And so that project is being built in 2 phases. The first 150 megawatt phase, which will be used to serve WPS and Madison Gas and Electric customers, is scheduled to go in service early April of next year. Beyond those large scale utility solar projects, we also, and I believe we talked about this in September, but we have 2 innovative renewable energy programs at WE Energies that we're partnering with our customers and communities to participate in. One is our Solar Now program, where we're partnering with local communities and businesses that wish to host solar on their facilities. And right now, I'm pleased to announce, out of a 35 megawatt program, we will have very close to 15 megawatts installed and operating by the end of this year, with the balance scheduled to be installed by the end of next year. Additionally, we have another 150 megawatts of available capacity through what we call our dedicated renewable energy resource pilot program, which will allow larger scale deployment of renewables through specific service agreements with dedicated customers wishing to really facilitate even more renewables development in the state of Wisconsin. So beyond that, we are still going to need additional generation. Reshaping will be needed to meet our 70% reduction goal. So what is our strategy to transition to this cleaner energy future? First, we're going to be accelerating our progress on investing in new renewable resources while still delivering very meaningful customer savings. That'll come from not only fossil plant retirements, but also from operating these renewable plants that would take less operations and maintenance and no fuel costs. We'll also be expanding our clean energy portfolio, which will include innovative storage investments as we go forward. And we can talk a little bit about how we plan to do that. And then we're going to continue to work with our customers, our regulators, and other stakeholders to really work towards achieving that 70% carbon reduction goal. So what will the next 5 years look like? So that involves reshaping our portfolio further to reduce our carbon footprint and achieve further customer savings, as I just said. It will involve additional plant retirements, such as the Oak Creek power plant units 5, 6, 7, and 8, as Julian mentioned earlier from the article. We'll also be retiring 2 older natural gas-fired peaking plants in West Marinette and Weston, Wisconsin. And then we'll be looking to develop new utility-scale zero-carbon resources, solar, wind, as well as batteries. And then we'll continue to quantify those customer benefits and progress towards our 70% carbon reduction goal as we execute on that plan. So what are the key considerations as we built the plan? Well, we want to make continued progress on that carbon reduction goal. We do want to focus on cost control and develop opportunities and execute on those to provide customer savings as we reshape our fleet. And we're really focused on identifying the aging units for potential retirements, because those are the plants that typically would require extensive future capital and larger O&M costs to continue to operate. So the economic advantages to retiring those older units makes more sense. And there's also some elements of significant future environmental compliance requirements that may be needed to make some of those plants available to operate going forward. So as we looked at which plants we would look to retire, those were some of the key elements that we looked at. Additionally, we do have some lease generation where that lease will be coming due in 2022 for some natural gas generation units that we have in our fleet. So with that, to achieve our 70% carbon reduction goal, we really look at retiring approximately another 1,800 or so of older, less efficient fossil generation over the next 5 years. So as we talked about the Oak Creek units, we're a little over 1,000 megawatts there, and then we think we'll identify about another 300 megawatts of future coal retirement over the next 5 years. Additionally, as I mentioned, we've got our Weston and West Marinette gas-fired units, and then a leased unit on the gas side, which would be about 400 megawatts. So as we look at, if you remember a moment ago, back in 2017, we were around 5,000 megawatts. We had worked it down to just about 3,000. After these additional rounds of retirements, we will only have about 1,700 megawatts of coal-fired generation in our company-wide footprint by 2025. So ultimately, that would really equate to we'll have retired about 2/3 of our coal generation fleet in just over a decade. one of the key things that's a little bit different today than it was when we talked in 2019 is we've had a chance to really dig in on battery and storage prices. So in the last decade, we've really seen the price of lithium ion, sorry, this 7 o'clock stuff, I get a little tongue tied, so I apologize and thank you for tolerating it. But since 2010, lithium ion battery prices have fallen 87, almost 90%. So just as a point of reference, to install 1 kilowatt hour of battery storage back in 2010, it would have cost just under $1,200. Now back in, as we go forward into 2019, it's just over $150 for that same kilowatt hour. We also believe as we've watched the price curves on that, it's really starting to level off. So much like we did with solar, we wanted to take advantage for our customers' benefit of all those price declines and sort of strike once we feel we've kind of reached what we call an asymptoting, where it's leveling off. And we believe we're achieving that and seeing that happen in the marketplace right now on battery storage. We're also going to invest more in solar investments here in Wisconsin. And we plan to invest in some additional natural gas units that are far more efficient, more reliable, because we do need that to ensure reliability and dispatchability to meet our customers' needs. When they need energy, we need to be able to provide it. So in total, we look to build and own over 1,600 megawatts of additional renewables, battery storage, and efficient natural gas investment. On the renewable side, right now we're projecting we would be installing about 500 megawatts of additional solar generating capacity and approximately 100 megawatts of additional wind. On the battery storage side, we're estimating we will be installing about 600 megawatts, and that'll be spread across not only existing solar facilities to pair that storage with renewables, but also on in the limited capacity potentially on some standalone facilities without any specific renewable generation directly associated with it. And then we're looking to install some new natural gas, what we call RICE units, which is an acronym that stands for Reciprocating Internal Combustion Engine. It's a very modular method of generation, one we've gotten some really good experience with in the UP of Michigan, where we recently installed 2 power plants that are powered exclusively by RICE units, very reliable, extremely efficient, and really served us well in the UP. So we'll be looking to leverage our experience there to meet some of our peaking capacity needs here in Wisconsin. One of the questions you had, Julie, is what are the impacts to the consumer, to customers? Basically, in big dollars, or I'm sorry, in broad brushstrokes, our path to 70 will lower CO2 emissions for sure, but it's also expected to deliver approximately $1 billion in net present value customer savings to our customers over the next 20 years. One might ask, well, where does that come from? Well, there's two large things. We're avoiding some things as it relates to capital and O&M. So we're basically deploying new capital, or I'm sorry, new technology that doesn't require the same amount of capital refreshments and operations and maintenance costs that some of the older fossil units did. Additionally, we're able to generate electricity from these renewable resources without having any fuel costs. The beautiful thing about the sunshine, as much as we enjoy sitting in it, it's also free. Same thing with the wind. So we're able to harness those things using this new technology and not have to pay additional costs for the fuel to generate that electricity from those resources. So we will be making some additional filings as we look to execute on this plan. We will obviously need to get commission approval like we do with any other investments that we make. And so more details will come as we make those final decisions and get those scheduled to go. One thing I want to point out is just sort of a quick snapshot on how much of our electricity supply by fuel type has evolved. So from 2005 through our estimate in 2030, we generated in 2005, about 73% of our electricity came from coal generation. Only 27% came from low or no carbon. As we look at what the results were in 2019, the majority, 60%, did come from low and no carbon resources, with 40% coming from coal. And as we look forward to 2030, we believe about 79% of our electric generation through our fleet, our corporate-wide fleet, will come from low and no carbon resources, while 21% will come from coal. So those are the high-level points that we wanted to share with you all tonight to give you a sense of what our plans are, where we've been, where we envision going. So at this point, we'll hand it over to George if you'd like to facilitate questions.
Oh, for sure.
And I'm going to take a quick sip if you don't mind.
Oh, take a couple. Hello, family. Just a reminder, there are 51 of us on the call right now 52. And in terms of asking questions, again, we want to be as democratic and have as many questions as possible. So, as a reminder, below your gallery screen there, where it says security, participants, chat, etc. Under participants, if you click that, at the bottom of that roll, there is a blue hand. If you click that blue hand, you get in line to ask a question. And that's done digitally, so I know exactly who is next. And we ask everyone to do that. There are a couple pages of us, so I cannot see if somebody is raising their hand. So again, in the center of the screen below the video there, click participants and click the blue hand to get in line for a question. I see Phil Smith and then Dana Kelly. Phil Smith.
Wow, that was quick. Thanks a lot. And Rich, thanks so much. Great news on a lot of stuff. I'm excited. But can you be more specific relative to renewables, wind and solar? What percent do you think you might be at, say, in 2030 and 2050 of your total generation in terms of just the renewables, not the natural gas and the other stuff? And if you could, I'm always curious too, what, as you go to more renewables, is there a limit? Will the battery storage or will the storage be restricting you to go to even higher levels, like 70 or 80% renewables? Is storage anticipated to catch up so that you can do it economically? Get my drift?
I believe so. So I don't believe, as we sit here today, I have a breakdown to share with you of the different technologies around what we're expecting to have sort of in 2030, how much would be solar, how much would be wind, but we could certainly try to follow up and share that with Julie as a takeaway. So I apologize for not having that as we sit here today. I think if I follow your question on the storage piece of it, at some point, yes, you will need to have the ability to dispatch power for when the sun isn't shining, the wind isn't blowing. So we can't really be at a point of 100% renewables without storage really achieving a great level of economics to be sort of widespread, if you will. We will always need the ability to deploy electrons just because of how we use it as a society. So by 2030, 2050, what will that look like? It's hard to say. We believe that the technology will continue to advance. We'll continue to monitor that. And I think the fact that, you see us now advancing some plans to deploy storage really says, we respond to those economics when it makes sense for our customers and does not impair reliability. I think the big thing we need to keep in mind is we do have some, strategic and basic regulatory requirements. We have to be able to be reliable, we have to be safe, and we have a mandate to be affordable. So we will need to do all of our planning sort of with those three things in mind from a policy standpoint. And certainly as the technology evolves, I think you'll continue to see a shift there. Hopefully that's responsive to what you're looking for, but I don't, like I said, I don't.
I get it.
Oh, yep. Yeah. If I had a crystal ball to be able to tell you exactly when, I might not even need to work for a living.
I hear you. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Just a reminder, if you can state your name, organization, and your question briefly. On the stack, we have Dana, Gerald, and then George Stone. Dana.
Hi, thank you again, George. Thank you, Richard and Tanya, for your time. I'm Dana Kelly with Northside Rising. My question is twofold. According to your report you just gave, apparently Milwaukee is not in the first phase of the upgrade to solar, and it appears that there's still not a projected date for that upgrade. So with that being said, for right now, have you and will you consider a write-off of a COVID moratorium debt that has been accumulated over this period of time?
So we are working with the Public Service Commission as it relates to COVID and the implications of that. As we sit here today, I don't know how that's going to all be resolved, but I think everyone appreciates that, we're regulated by the commission. We've done several things in response to COVID, including implementing a moratorium and not doing any disconnections, waiving late payment charges for a period of time, as well as extending even more flexible payment arrangements. We'll continue to work with the Public Service Commission and other stakeholders as we find our way as a society and as a region out of that situation. But as we sit here today, I don't know that I have any answers to tell you how that will all play itself out.
Yeah, and I just to add to what Rich just said, I mean, we continue to work with our customers and find ways, and if they are eligible for energy assistance, that is something that our customer care center is always willing and more than happy to have that conversation with any customer. So we'd also encourage, folks, as they're talking to anyone who is experiencing hardship as a result of this pandemic, to please call us so that we can help them in any way we can to continue to serve them with the energy they need.
Well, thank you. Next on the stack, we have Gerald, George Stone, and Martin LaConte. Gerald. Gerald, can you unmute yourself? Hello?
I think we found it. All right. Well, I'm excited that We Energy is making a strong commitment to solar farms, but I just have a concern myself that unlike a wind farm where the farmers can farm right up to the base of the wind turbines, a solar farm takes that land out of production for agriculture. Is that a concern?
Just making sure I'm not on mute. Sorry, I'm not trusting myself with the technology today. So ultimately, what I'd say is, it's one of those things, a concern. I don't know if I would use that word at this point. It's certainly an element that we're cognizant of. It is a point that was raised during the evaluation and approval process of our first two projects. In fact, one of the commissioners, Mike Hipsch, who's no longer a commissioner, his term has since passed and he's moved on to other things, but he had made a comment as they were deliberating on that, on the approval for those two projects, is at some point, it'd be something that they'll need to take a harder look at, but that is exactly why there is the rigorous process that's in place, not only with the commission, but also with other state agencies. We work with the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection, or DATCAP as we refer to them, as well as the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, so that those perspectives are all taken into account when projects are evaluated and approved.
Well, thank you, Richard. Next, we have George Stone, then Martin LaConte. After that, the stack is open. Charlie Benzinger just jumped in. If you have a question, please, under participant, click the blue hand. Thank you. George Stone.
Does WEC, what percentage of the renewable energy produced by WEC is from the hydro plants out in the western part of the state? In other words, how much of it is hydro as opposed to wind and solar?
Hydro is a smaller percentage. I'm just looking to see if I have the percentage in front of me. I can find it for you. Our wind and solar is certainly gaining on the percentage of what is hydro. We continue to maintain our hydros and where it makes sense. I know we just did
Sure.
an upgrade a couple years ago because we're going to continue to need to depend on those in order
A lot
to
of people
reach
don't
these new.
realize that's counted in with when.
Yep, absolutely.
And so
Yep. So the
I-
existing ones will continue to play a major role in providing that renewable energy in order to help us get to those goals that we've set.
second part of my question is, does the WEC have a position on raising the renewable energy portfolio standard for the state? I know you've got good goals for your own company, but the standard for the state is lagging way behind the other upper Midwestern states at a mere 10%.
Yeah, from our standpoint, we continue to work with all stakeholders. We are an active member of the governor's task force on climate change. so we continue to facilitate working through that process and be an active participant. I think regardless of what those renewable portfolio standards are, we're certainly committed to making investments in renewable energy as well as the storage to go along with it so that we can, certainly take care of those things that we can control. And we continue to work through those other processes with the other stakeholders, including the governor's administration, the commission, other lawmakers, and customer groups such as yourself.
Good. You good, George?
Thank
Let's
you.
go on a quick question from the chat here. Is there a projected date for the South Oak Creek plant to be upgraded?
So as Rich said that the South Oak Creek units 5 and 6 are going to be retired, and we are aiming for 2023 for those units, and then 2024 for 7 and 8.
Well, thank you. Thank you,
Mhm.
Tanya. Next, we have Martin, Charlie, and Joe in Kenosha. Martin.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, George. Thank you, Rich, and thank you, Tanya, for being here. I'm Martin. I'm also from Kenosha. I am part of Sierra Club 350 and Extinction Rebellion. So yeah, I'm very excited by this news. I'm also very, very worried. The research that I've been immersed in for years, that's made me so sick I can't even read it anymore. And also there's just so much of it, I can't read all of it, states pretty clearly that by 2050, well, I won't say all of it, but again, more than I can read, and specifically one report that rings out in my head day and night, by Harvard scientists and backed by the former head of Australia's military, because climate crisis is a huge national security concern, states that high probability of human extinction by 2050. So, and even the more conservative research, a lot of it that's more conservative, states that the world will be in total chaos by 2050, realistically, if we're still around. So there's obviously a discrepancy here between our aspirations and what and our projections and what the scientists, what thousands and thousands of scientists are saying, clamoring to around the world. So I guess my concern is simply that the having projected dates of 2030 and 2050, while that may be popular and while that may be the norm even among politicians, the scientists is very clear that that's not enough to save us and our families. So I guess if I had a question, I would ask, what is the I guess honestly, I guess it is more of a comment, if I'm being honest. I just simply worry, and I worry about all of us and our families. So yeah, that's it.
Well, thank you, Martin. Richard or Tanya, do you want to respond to that?
Um, I understand your concerns. I think we all share everyone's concern for our planet and our environment, and making sure that we're doing the right things each and every day, both from a business perspective and an individual perspective. And from our perspective, we are making decisions based on, being able to meet those requirements that Rich talked about, both being an environmental steward as well as, serving our customers with the energy they need each and every day, and that in doing that in a balanced way that takes all of those things into account. And I understand that that may not be what meets your concerns. That's just the approach that we're taking, and being in line with what the other stakeholders also are trying to accomplish.
Thank you, Tanya.
Yeah, sorry.
So we have on the stack Charlie Benzinger, Joe Dobaniewicz, and Terry Wiggins. Go ahead, Charlie.
Okay, I'm Charlie Bensinger with 350.org. My question is, have you done or do you have any programs that would assist or incentivize customers to weatherize their homes and upgrade appliances? And this, I think, is very relevant right now when we're in a time of economic challenge. Anything that could help customers, especially low-income customers, reduce their energy bills would be hugely welcomed. And just simply by changing out old appliances and doing some simple weatherization would actually save people money on their energy bills right away. And for customers who are looking at thousands of dollars of energy bills come April, past due energy bills, this is going to be a rough spring for them. So it would be really great if We Energies could step up to the plate here and help those folks out with reducing their energy bills.
Absolutely. And that's something we not only encourage our customers through, but we work with the state-run program, and that is something that years ago it used to be administered right by us, and then the state had formed the organization Focus on Energy, which I'm sure you've all heard of, and we work hand in hand with Focus on Energy to work with our customers and promote those same conservation programs and energy efficiency programs that you just mentioned. So if you go to their website, you'll find those rebates, you'll find the weatherization things. We also have them on our website and have tips and things that, and as well as links to all those financial incentives that can help customers.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And next, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but Joe Dobaniewicz of Kenosha.
Yeah, that's right. Joe Debanowitz from Kenosha. I have a couple of questions relating to some of the issues that were talked about earlier. The location of the battery storage and solar panels and wind power is what I'm asking about. Obviously, battery storage doesn't take too much square footage or acres. Neither do wind turbines, but solar panels definitely take a lot of acreage. I was wondering if you are considering some brownfields to greenfields concepts. The plants, the plants that you're shutting down on the shores of Lake Michigan at Oak Creek would be a brownfield area, and there are lots of brownfield areas across the state to build your solar fields. So I was wondering if those are all under consideration.
I think the short answer to your question is yes, they're under consideration. We always look to really optimize the investments that we make, whether it be the battery storage, the solar, or the wind, for example. If we can leverage land we already own that may be difficult to repurpose, we would certainly look at that. Some of the challenges with that is just the amount of land you need for a solar field. To your point, battery storage takes up less than that. So there may be some opportunities, and we are working through a lot of the preliminary evaluations on where some of these items might be sited. So the one thing that will probably be a challenge is to put a solar farm on a parcel like that is typically not large enough to get the type of scale that you would need. But there may certainly be opportunities for deploying some of the other technologies at some of those sites, as you indicated. We're just not far enough along in the evaluations to have discussions around exactly where we might put particular technologies. But in short, yes, those are all sort of on the table to be evaluated and looked at. One, and maybe if I, oh, can you guys still hear us? We just had a little light flicker. I think it's just because it's getting late in the day in the building, the automation systems are turning down. One other point I would make on sort of the Solar Now program, which is one of the community partnership programs that we had talked about. We are actually working very closely with a number of customers to take essentially some brownfield sites and green them up. One that's relatively notable, has been public, is we're building a solar array 2.25 megawatts on a former landfill site that's owned by the city of Milwaukee on the at my directions, I believe it's the south end of the airport. So when we are even doing projects in that particular program, we are looking for opportunities to take advantage of existing brownfield sites, sort of repurpose them, if you will, to host green energy solutions. So just in another example I wanted to provide about our opportunity, the opportunities we evaluate and try to take advantage of some of those great win-win type of situations when they present themselves.
Thank you very much.
George, you're muted.
Thank you, Terry Wiggins.
Thanks. Thank you. My concern is, Rich, you talked about the fact that WEC is investing, and that means in the future, not something it's already done, in natural gas, which last I checked was still fossil fuel. And while it's low carbon, as you indicated, it's likely high methane, which is in some ways worse than carbon dioxide. Can you speak to that?
Pointing back to the sort of the principles or the pillars we need to operate within, we still have a need to deliver reliable energy and have resources that are dispatchable. And if you look at, a lot of the research we've read and a lot of the trade press will tell you, indicate, really natural gas is that bridge fuel to take us from, the traditional all fossil fuel generation to, some point in the future where we're probably all renewables. And in order to really maintain that reliability and having that dispatchability when the sun isn't shining, the wind's not blowing, when our customers in, the northern part of the state, when it's, 9 o'clock at night want to flip on a light switch, we need to be able to, we have an obligation to provide that energy. And so as we look at the different options available, that really is the optimal solution. And those units would only run when absolutely necessary. They're replacing peaking units. So they're there to back us up, if you will, back up those other resources when those other technologies aren't able to produce the energy that's needed to meet demand at that moment in time.
Well, thank you. And thanks, Terry. On the stack, we have Don Ferber, Jill Mitzler, Greg Walter, Dana Kelly. We keep going. Phil Smith, Ray. But I want to back up to a question on the chat. And Don Ferber, you're next. Get ready. What is your position on third-party community solar, We Energies?
So third party, generally any law, we're supportive of any system that's consistent and compliant with Wisconsin law. We will certainly interconnect any of those systems that comply with the law. We do have some active legislation, some active litigation right now involving, so I can't really talk a whole lot about that at this point, but I would just make that broad statement.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Don Ferber.
Yes, thank you. I'm Don Ferber. I'm a volunteer with the Sierra Club and appreciate your presentation, updating us as to what's going on and answering questions. And glad you're making good progress. It's my understanding that the old Oak Creek power plant is being shut down in the future, in good part because it's no longer economic. So what I'm wondering about is how much more cost effective, not the efficiency rating, but how much more cost effective, say per unit energy, is the Elm Road generating station compared to the old Oak Creek plant? What are you paying as the cost for new renewable energy? And what I'm getting at too is, at what point do you think, even if it potentially would have useful life left, understanding your crystal ball is not clear on this, might the renewable energy become more cost effective than running the Elm Road generating station?
Yeah, so those numbers, number one, we don't have with us, and generally those are filed confidentially, even when we do go through rate proceedings and fuel filing. So it's not something we could share even in a setting like this for a variety of reasons. There's for example, the renewable prices we get, those are confidential and proprietary to the developers. So we have to be mindful of that. And the underlying costs, you might be dealing with contracts between us and coal or rail providers. So we just can't really disclose those in public settings. And on top of that, I don't have them with me to even directionally talk about that in even a sense of magnitude.
Well, without those numbers, at least you have some sort of sense as to maybe Oak Creek at the Elmwood Generating Station may become less economic than new renewable energy?
I don't have that where I could speak to that tonight. No, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Don. Next on the stack is Jill Mitchler, Greg Walter, Dana Kelly, and Phil Smith. Jill.
Hi, I'm Jill Mitchler from Citizens Climate Lobby. And my question is similar to the group or the third-party solar. Have you any plans, or how do you deal with individual and group buy renewables as well as microgrids?
Well, I guess if I'm following the question correctly, on the group buys, in our view, if you're just buying it through a larger group and you're putting it on your roof as an individual, you would go through the standard process to interconnect that. So we would really treat that no differently than any other application for interconnection. Microgrids, there's so many different definitions of what a microgrid is or isn't. It's really hard to say, but ultimately when we look to, when we get requests for interconnecting any sort of technology with the system, there's a process that's laid out through PSC section 119. We have a team that will evaluate those applications and make sure that any interconnection is not only lawful and appropriate, but also can and would be done to preserve the safety and reliability on any upgrades that might be needed, are identified and taken on before that those interconnections would occur.
Thank you. Greg Walter.
Hi, I'm Greg Walter with 350 Milwaukee, and focusing a little bit on the upcoming plant closures in Oak Creek. And I know that they're a couple of years out for the first ones, and probably about 3 years or so, 4 years out for the second group. But what is the impact on the employees going to be down there? And does WEC have a transition plans for those employees? And how does that compare to past transition for employees at other plants around the state?
Thank you for asking that question. With the announcement just coming out in November, we're starting to have those discussions with our labor unions and other just planning horizons as far as what our fleet looks like. So at this time, it's too premature to say what our staffing plan is once those plants retire, but that's something we're going to be working on as we move forward with those continuous plans for closing down the units at South Oak Creek. So we have we're having those discussions now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I think I'm next, Dana Kelly again. Thank you again. I appreciate everything I've heard thus far, and actually the last question ties into my question, because job creation is another thing that we're working on on the north side of Milwaukee with Northside Rising, and we're considering if you would consider on-bill financing, where you would front the bill of upgrading, retrofitting homes to weatherize and make homes more energy efficient, which would create jobs, transitional jobs, solar installation, roofing, weatherization, heating, ventilation. All of those things would create livable wage jobs. It would also do away with the energy crisis that we're in, especially on the north side, we're losing our health and our wealth literally through the windows and the doors. Particulate matter comes in and our heat goes out. So we're just asking, just like Greg just asked and spoke, what are we doing to ensure that your ratepayers are able to pay their rates and have affordable rates, which Richard, that's your regulatory affairs that you take care of. So that's my question.
Sorry, I was on mute for a second. Appreciate the question. You know, there's a lot to unpack in that question, frankly, and I'll try to do it justice. I think one of the big things is as we look forward with our generation reshaping, we're very mindful of the impact it has on customer bills. So we're trying to make these investments in ways that are smart, will ultimately reduce customer bills or make them less than they otherwise would have been for sure. We've also done everything we can to avoid rate cases. You know, we hadn't raised rates for until this last year for a period of 5 years. So we're mindful of those things. To your question, as it relates specifically to, I believe it was the term on-bill financing. I've heard it called different things, so hopefully I captured the one you used. We're certainly open to having discussions with all of our stakeholders on different ways that we can facilitate community support, helping out our customers and working with them to achieve the goals that they have. In fact, I believe that is an element that's been at least discussed at broad levels in the governor's task force. So I haven't seen the draft report on that, but those are certainly one of the many types of topics that we engage with our customer groups when in fact they bring it to us. So we would certainly, we'd be open to any conversation about things such as that. We can't guarantee it would find a way that would be workable, but we're certainly happy and have a demonstrated track record of working with our customer groups to try and find solutions with them and for them.
So going forward, then how can we have those discussions?
Well, we can certainly try to swap some contact information, or maybe Julie can provide me yours, and we can certainly figure something out and try to have a discussion there and see what might work.
That would be great. That would be a great Christmas gift. Thank you.
Certainly.
Unmute myself, but we are really have had an intense 55 minutes here, and I want to thank you, Rich and Tanya. Can we get 15 more minutes of question and answer from you?
Yes, certainly.
Is that good?
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you so much. On the stack, we've got, excuse my cough, Phil Smith and Ray Grosh, Joe in Kenosha, George Stone, and we'll keep going from there. Hey, Phil.
Yeah, thanks for letting me ask another question. I am both with 350.org as well as Citizens Climate Lobby. And, Rich, with the new administration, there's going to be some real action on climate change issues, potentially anything from a carbon price to regulatory approaches, maybe putting limits on CO2 out the smokestacks of the natural gas and coal plants. Any sense of where you guys are in your long-term planning for that eventuality? Are you going to go with more renewables and large-scale storage, or are you going to go with CO2 removal off the stacks? What is your thinking down the line in 5 or hopefully less years when more significant requirements are put on the utilities?
Okay. Just making sure we didn't both talk over one another between Tanya and I, sorry. I think as you sort of see in the blueprint we talked about, or not see, but as we talk through it, our view is that renewables paired with storage over the long term will likely be what ultimately becomes the economic solution to get us there on the long term side. That said, I think if you would put yourself back 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, and someone would tell you this is exactly where things would be, you might be surprised on how economics change. So the reason I point that out, or the technological advances combined with lower prices, there might be something that an innovation that comes along 10, 15 years from now that changes that. But certainly as we look at what the trends are, if we had gun to the head, so to speak, ask me what I think we would do to get to that net 50 goal. I think it's going to be probably renewables in large part paired with storage. But at the same time, I always like to say we reserve the right to be smarter tomorrow than we were today. So if there are technological advances that, different technology makes more sense, provides the same reliability and customer benefits as far as being able to serve them safely and reliably and affordably, we'll certainly consider those as well.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, am I up?
Yeah, it looks like George is muted. He's not telling you no.
I'm sorry, I'm coughing and I'm trying to be polite here. Hey, Ray, you got it.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for coming coming and speaking to us today. My name is Ray Grash, and I just have a couple of questions. Your parent company here seems to have been making some big investments in natural gas of recent. I know there's a couple of big compressor stations that they're putting up. And when you make those kind of investments in the utility industry, you're usually looking at a 20, 30, 40-year payback. And I'm concerned about the amount of money being spent on those kind of resources, which really in the next 10 years, we ought to be thinking about retiring. And I know that the Midwest Independent System Operator, MISO, has had some reports out recently talking about utilities, it's similar to We Energies, that own both distribution and production or generation, and you have a tendency to run your own resources, even though they might not be the least costly, because a lot of that wind energy coming in from out west is pretty low cost at some times. But I'm just curious, do you have any long-term plans for, let's say, using renewable natural gas as a backup? We live in a cold climate, and in the winter months, November, December, January, sunlight is pretty rare up here, and you're going to need something. But I hate to see you relying on that on natural natural gas, when potentially and several utilities in Europe have demonstration plants now running using generating renewable natural gas, using the excess, when solar and wind get so inexpensive that you're overproducing, you can actually use the excess for power through frequency regulation to generate hydrogen for the manufacture of renewable natural gas. Any thoughts on that? Any research and development your utilities doing on anything like that?
So as it relates to renewable natural gas, I think, coming from the dairy state, there's certainly some maybe I'll take it in a little bit different direction maybe than where you were asking, and that's taking the excess energy that's out there from an electrical standpoint, generating hydrogen to be used to make renewable natural gas later. But we've got large herds of cattle that serve the dairy industry well, and so there's certainly some research being done. There's a couple of pilot projects that are out there where some of that manure is being digested, then renewable natural gas being generated from that. Historically, it had been used to generate electricity. Now there's some additional opportunities maybe for the individuals that own those projects to monetize some of the environmental benefits, either through an EPA program or a California fuel standards program. So we do have we continue, like anything else, being a natural gas distribution company, as well as an electrical utility. We do continue to look at and monitor current events and see where things are going. And this is certainly an area where there's been a lot more activity, and part of our ongoing planning efforts are to look at and evaluate the opportunities for renewable natural gas as we go forward. So I guess the short answer to your question, yes. As we stay here today, are we ready to, switch over purely to that? Not quite yet, but we're certainly, looking to start making some of those inroads and understanding that better.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, on a time check, I've got about 10 minutes after 8, and we have 4 people on the stack. So I'd like to end the stack with the 4 people. That's Joe, George, Linda, and then Greg Walter. Joe.
Yeah, final question about the brownfields and all that kind of thing. The question that I have is your current problem that you have in Oak Creek with the coal piles that are spreading out the coal dust to the neighbors, and also the coal ash disposal problem that you have. Will those be smaller problems when the Oak Creek plant scales down in 2023 and 24, or are those going to be continuing problems that you have to address with the EPA and the DNR?
Well, we'll continue to have coal at that site with the Elm Road units. So will we need as much with the South Oak Creek units gone? No. But we will continue to reutilize and the byproducts that come out of the air quality control system that Elm Road, as you know, one of those is gypsum that we use and reutilize 100% by selling it for products, both from an agricultural standpoint as well as for use in Portland cement and wallboard. But from your question about will there still be coal there still will be coal at Oak Creek, yes, with the Elm Road units.
Well, thank you. George Stone.
First, a point of information I wanted to make after Terry's questions about methane, natural gas. Actually, natural gas on the average is 93% methane. Now, when you burn it, you produce carbon dioxide. The carbon is oxidized. So that's, of course, an anthropogenic, a global warming, a heat absorbing gas, carbon dioxide, we all know that. But methane, as Terry pointed out, is far more effective as a heat absorbing gas, more than 20 times as effective as carbon dioxide. So the danger from natural gas is leaking because once it's burned, it's CO2. But that's a very significant contribution in many areas.
Thank you.
I did have one other question. I wanted to ask you what is the relationship between WEC and the Southern Company out of Atlanta?
There is no relationship from a business standpoint. Our executive chairman and our current CEO previously worked at companies of Southern Company.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we have Linda, and then we'll close with Greg Walter. Linda Frank.
Hi, thank you so much. This has been very informative. I'm going to raise a question about the effect of electrification of the energy supply and whether the utility has done some evaluation on how that might significantly increase demand for electric power, and how you might be positioned to address that increased demand. Thank you.
One thing I'd like it to do, electrification, is to handle my muting and unmuting automatically for me, so I can't keep screwing it up. So my apologies for the delay here. One of the things with electrification is some of it really depends on, have we looked at it? Certainly. We continue to study it. One of the things that we've actually recently proposed at the commission is a pilot around electric vehicles, so that we can better understand how some of that charging behavior might help better utilize the existing, particularly the grid, the assets that are out there that are utilized, for short periods of time throughout the day, but have sort of, we'll call it excess capacity on them for other periods, particularly late at night. So one of the things that we're really trying to drive is some consumer behavior with this pilot to really leverage the lower cost wind that's coming on in, as was referenced earlier, late in the night. So you have lower cost on peak or off peak energy charges. However, you also have significant amounts of distribution and transmission capacity because consumption is lower. Can we shift some of that charging load to overnight? And so the answer to your question on, do we have the adequate resources? It really sort of depends. When things get electrified, when is that load coming into the system? If it's all coming in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in August, we're probably not quite there. But if we can work together with our stakeholders and really drive behavior to take advantage of the assets that are already there that are underutilized at certain parts of the day and charge EVs, in the overnight hours, we can really leverage the investments that are there already, not have to build out, and then ultimately spread more, from to Julie's question earlier about customer impact. That's one of the ways we can really drive down energy costs on a unit of consumption basis is if we electrify and we're charging cars instead of putting gasoline in them. There's more kilowatt hours that are being sold to recover the same costs in that distribution infrastructure. So those are all things that we're currently looking at. We think pilots, as we've proposed here on the electric vehicle charging side, is a great way to prove out some of these concepts and figure out ways that we can make them even maybe even more advantageous or more effective. But we're still in the we're learning every day around some of this stuff. The technology changes pretty drastically in short periods of time. So we're really working hard to stay on the forefront of that and understand it. And again, this pilot is one example of where we really want to take the opportunity to learn how customer behavior can be informed so that better choices are made to take advantage of the assets that are there, thereby leveraging some of that excess capacity, if you will, that might be out there.
Thank you.
Okay, and just as a quick follow-up, are you also looking at electrification of heating of buildings, which would be also following up on the electrification of transportation?
We don't have any pilots or anything designed, typically or specifically designed for that, because typically the investments to convert a building over from natural gas forced air heat to electrification requires a little bit more investment from the customer side. But we certainly, again, as customers come to us with desires to explore some of those things, we'd happily have those conversations. Are we looking at what the impact could be and thinking about that? Yes, but we don't have any programs designed like we do for the electric vehicle pilot at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Greg Walter.
Thanks for that question, Lynn. It took one of mine, but that's good. And I'm hoping that that pilot program for electric vehicle charging gets put into place. The last I saw, that hadn't been approved. But let me go back in a different direction then and talk a little bit again about the Oak Creek closure. I don't know, have you, if WEC has done a projection of what the debt balance is going to be on that plant at the end of 2024, those plants at the end of 2024. And do you have a plan? Does WEC have a plan for how to retire that debt?
Okay. So we don't really have, as we see here today, I don't have the numbers to be able to share with you, but that is part of our, as we talked about, executing on this reshaping plan and engaging with stakeholders and regulators. How we handle some of those unrecovered book balances will certainly be part of that larger discussion that we'll continue to have with the stakeholders as we continue to execute on and implement our reshaping plan.
Yeah, thanks.
You good, Greg?
Yeah, as good as can be.
All right, all right. I'm gonna throw a little wrench in here and ask for one more question from someone who has not asked a question. Someone who's got a little burning in their tummy about, I wonder about this. Just one more time. Anybody want to speak up who hasn't spoken up yet tonight? Going once, twice, and 3 times. I think that's a wrap. Julie. Are you on mute, Julie?
Thank you. I really appreciated the deep concern and passion that the young man from Kenosha earlier expressed about the deep urgency of this situation of climate change and the fact that we really don't have much time to fool around. It can be a very frightening thing if you really dig into this pretty deeply. And a lot of us that are working on these issues tend to read a lot of things that are very alarming about the urgency that we face to try to draw some kind of a halt to the ongoing issuing of greenhouse gases, but also the fact that if we stopped right now with all greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere, we would still see the temperatures rising, and we have to start looking at ways to remove that carbon from the atmosphere, whether it's through agricultural procedures or forestation, reforestation, or other more technical means. But it's definitely a very troubling situation that we are in. And sometimes I think we get so up in, oh, well, the business end of this and what, how much is this going to cost and what's going to replace what? And yet we've got to really stretch our imaginations at this point. And I guess I got to challenge We Energies to really use their forethought and their imaginations and to explore lots of new technical things that are developing, such as energy systems, alternative energy systems that depend on different nitrogen or other sources that are not being addressed at this point. But we really have to move fast. And I guess I also have read your Pathway to a Cleaner Energy Future report that WEC put out. And that's available on the website for We Energy or for WEC Energy Group. I recommend people take a look at that, Pathway to a Cleaner Energy Future. And the thing that alarmed me about it was that it included natural gas as an alternative energy, not as a bridge to all alternatives, not as something we temporarily have to use, but it was definitely in the category of alternative energies in that report. And we have to be real about this. It is a fossil fuel, and we need to appreciate that and be very careful of how we use it. So we have a lot of work to do. We have work to do at the grassroots level. You have a lot of work to do at the corporate level, and it's not an easy task, but I firmly believe we need to work together. And if we can do that and keep communicating and expressing our concerns to you and having the kind of rapport that we could have this evening with as honest of answers as you could possibly give. I know that some of those were definitely limited because of information that may not have been public at this point or available to you at this point. But we do appreciate the fact that we could have this exchange, and we hope to have much more of this to be able to solve this crisis together. So thank you everyone for participating, and we'll follow up with people who are in touch with Richard Stasik on some of the issues that we addressed. Thank you.